Hey guys, it's Stark here, and I'm recording this. It's going to be a multi-part series about compositing, and this is actually going to get into using channels, and this is actually the one thing that is really going to separate people from being a beginner to really advancing in compositing and getting more control. And I'm going to go over things that you may have been curious about before, like render passes and all of that, and how to use it and why we use it. So right now I'm in 3D Studio Max, and honestly, any modern 3D package, you're probably going to have all of these. And I'm using V-Ray as my renderer, and that may mean nothing to you, but whatever. This is just an active shade thing, so it's using my video card just to update it so I could see things in sort of real time. So if I like move a light, it'll just do that. Now, I'm gonna show you just my render passes before we move into After Effects. Now, here's the thing that you need to keep in mind is that there are no sort of standard work or render passes that you use. There's typical ones like here's Z depth for our camera. Like that's a kind of like a standard one. There's ones you're going to use more than others, like reflection, diffuse just to get the color. But there's other ones, and what these are is actually you may hear them called like channels, attributes, or I don't know, maybe layers or G buffer stuff, whatever. But what these are is I'm just rendering one frame, so it's not an animation. And this is all being held in one file, which we'll get into in After Effects. So I actually want to point out what this is. This is using something called object IDs. So what it is we're going to pretend that this is sort of like some fake job we have, okay? And we're told that the things that might change are going to be this yellow and red area. Maybe they're like, that's not going to change, but this blue part is. Now, the point of rendering out passes is that instead of me having to go in and re-render this, I could actually just selectively select this area and then change just that color. The way After Effects uses it is actually, it's not confusing, but it might be. So if you do get confused, just rewatch the video. And all we're doing when you do render passes, you're just basically reassembling what the 3D, like see this image here, how it's 3D color. It's just made up of all of this stuff. Like here's the alpha channel, not this, because this is actually something where you could call out elements. And we'll get into this because it's neat. And then like here's diffuse. So this is literally the color of the ball without any of the stuff. Now, I don't know if you're picking up on this, but the one thing that you'll maybe start to like realize as I'm going through these is that what it enables you to do is instead of being stuck with this final image here, or let's go here, like see how the background's blue, okay? It enables us to change every aspect of these parts. So it's not just, oh, I could change the colors, but I could change the background color because it's not affecting. I could change the reflection color, and we'll get into all of that. So I'm just going to go into After Effects, and then we'll get started there. So in After Effects, I just have this thing called ball.exr. Now, I rendered this out just at like half full res, but I'm actually going to show you this guy here, which is, and it comes with After Effects now, and you may have seen it and wonder what it does. So I'm doing an EXR, and actually, let me go back. When I rendered this out, what this is doing is, give it a second, I have to tell it to save all of these channels. So basically what this is that the file has just different layers to it, and we're calling those layers out. So I'm sure by now, if I'm just going to do this and I'll show you. Just dragging out a new comp, and it's 32-bit, so it might be a bit slower. And I have other programs open. Okay. So we're going to change it to 32 bits. And then our color space is just going to be sRGB. I'll find it right there. And then we're going to work linearly because just the way that V-Ray works, or the standard workflow for 3D is now, is linear color space, and that's a whole other subject. Now, as you can see, just right here, if I just, when I say channels, see red, green, blue, and alpha, all of these other things are the exact same thing. They're just other stuff. Okay, so we're just gonna call this guy main comp. Now, what's cool about this Pro EXR thing that comes with After Effects, we're just gonna click it. What it's gonna do is it creates all these comps where it has each of the channels in it. It also does this cool little like contact sheet thing where it kind of just assembles all of them, but some of them you won't see because I think it relies on the alpha channel, or there's just nothing there, so it's not evenly distributed. But you could see it. And again, the one thing to remember is that these will change depending on the situation at hand. So sometimes you might be at a place where they just have certain, like a standard script or something that's a workflow that you press it and then it'll generate them. So it might generate all of these elements plus like every element that the 3D program comes with, just in case. But in this case, I'm just doing the bare minimum. And I'm doing something really simple. I didn't want to do animation because I didn't want to overwhelm you guys. So the first thing we could do is we're just going to make this background, which I did this before, but already here, because we have this alpha thing, and this is super simple, we could go here. Okay, because it's all separate from the background, now we could change it and it's not affecting this. Now that's such a crude example, okay? So what we're gonna actually start doing is rebuilding this guy. One thing though that we're gonna do is, see this multi-matte element source? One of the problems, well, I'll come back to that. One of the problems that you're gonna see with all of these, when I'm just gonna add a new white layer, solid, is that there's this shadow here, which is typically fine. However, the problem is that we don't want to touch the shadow, because if we keep, how this all works is you're layering it up. So if I keep layering another black shadow on top of another black shadow, it's just going to continuously getting dark, and we don't want that. We want each element to have its own. So what's cool, and this is actually, I will say, in Nuke a lot easier. I'm probably going to do this exact same thing in Nuke just to illustrate the whole point of switching channels, because it does get a bit confusing. But what I want to do is I'm just going to duplicate this. So what happens is it creates, it's not an instance anymore. So now this is its own unique thing, and we're just going to call this sphere matte. Okay. And we're going to use this. It's going to pretty much go into every single one of them, because every single one of them has that shadow problem. Okay. But because we're doing this, it doesn't matter. So you're going to see this extractor, and that's created by the Pro EXR thing. And when I click it, this has every single channel. See all the layers? Every single channel is built in. Okay. So like this is the multi-matte one. Now this is where we're going to start getting into switching things around and doing all of this and blah, 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 because this is where it's really powerful, where you may just need to change one color, and that one color, imagine you have a whole image sequence that took overnight to render. Well, if you had something that you could just call out this one section, all you need to do is shift the color. You don't have to re-render this whole sequence, and it's not going to affect other things in the scene. So we're going to actually duplicate this, because we're going to have to do this twice. So we're going to just call this, we'll call this green and then red. Now this is going to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, of using different channels, okay? So the problem is, as you can see, is we have this shadow here. Well, we're gonna, obviously it says red and green, so we're gonna do this for red and green. What we're gonna do is we don't wanna use the alpha channel that it came with because it has a shadow built in. We wanna use the red channel, and watch what's gonna happen after miraculously. So it's taking the red channel and then it's saying, basically use this as its cookie cutter. So now there's nothing around it, there's no shadow. And you're getting this, and there's artifacts, but it doesn't matter in this case at all, and I'll show you why. So now we're gonna actually do the same thing for green. Okay, so we're just gonna tell it to use green here. So multi-matte green. And you'll see this disappear. And I'm actually gonna go ahead, and I probably have I have 100 gigs in my disk cache. So let me just do that, so maybe that'll speed it up. Okay, so now when we look, we don't have that shadow anymore because it's just made of these two pieces. It's kind of cool, right? And with this in mind, I'm actually going to delete the original one. And then I'm going to duplicate this because we're going to use it later. We're going to call this color, or we'll call it diffuse callout. And I'll get to that. So now what's cool is we have this guy right here. Now we're going to use this as a cutter because, again, remember what I said? Every single one of these comps has this problem where it has a shadow, and we don't want that. We do have a matte shadow layer. Let me get to it, which is cool. We want that on this one in particular. We do want that. But on the rest, we don't. So let's just go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I want to show you something. And this may be something you've run into before, and this is actually a really neat tidbit if you have. So I'm going to go to the alpha channel. Now you're going to see this line, okay? What that means is that it's not fully transparent, and After Effects or Adobe has thought about this, and all you have to do is go to the top layer and then go to alpha add. So now it's one cohesive thing, okay? Now the other thing I'm going to do is, just because we're using it as a matte, and it's quicker at a glance to see things, so we don't get this confused, what I want to do is I'm actually going to pre-comp these. We're just going to call it pre-comp, and we'll just call this circle matte. Okay, so now it's just flattened, and then I'm just going to add a fill and then make it white. And this is just visual. This is so that it's easier, so we could differentiate it from the diffuse callout. Okay, so now we have our main comp, which is this ball once it shows up. And what we want to do is rebuild this. Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're just going to rebuild everything from scratch. So we're going to go to layer, solid, and I want my background to be this blue. Maybe make it a little lighter. It's kind of drab, something cheery. And these bouncing balls might look familiar. I'm going to call them Rick's app balls, if you get what I'm saying, and I think you do. So this is just the pure render. So let's start layering these up, okay? Now, the first thing we want to do is, if you look down at the bottom, we want to get this contact shadow, okay? So we're going to go over to our matte shadow source here, and actually this guy is going to be sort of a special case because you're going to see that it's black, okay? However, that is fine. If we change it to multiply, this is actually not what we want. So we're going to go into here, and we're going to make a new solid black, okay? And then we're just going to go ahead and do alpha matte. And obviously you're not going to see anything because there's nothing there. So now it's black. Now, It'll always be black because that's exactly what a shadow is. Okay, so this is the only one that we're not cutting things out from. Okay, so we'll call this contact shadow. So this is just at the bottom. Now we just want to start building up. Now we're going to have this layer called the raw lighting layer. Okay, now you're going to notice the problem, which is, again, we have the shadow and then we have this funky thing, which is the floor. So what's cool is, remember this circle mat we made, okay? We're going to use this as a track mat and just use its alpha. So now the problem is solved. So it's gone. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that V-Ray, I don't know about other renders, but V-Ray has different types. So you're going to see there's stuff called like raw lighting. And what that is it's just the lighting information. So there's no color in it, which is exactly what we don't want. I don't want the color because if the color's in it, then it's going to affect the color layer that I do. And then I have to change both. So I have to do double the work. So all we're going to do is actually take this and we could leave it as normal for right now because it's just white. And then we have our shadow on the bottom. And you're going to start seeing this light. And this is from the, as you I'll open this guy up here, you're going to start seeing this rim light from it. So that's all that is. Okay. And also this is why I try to push, if I don't know if some of you guys may be new to me, but where I always talk about using a linear workflow is that everything will just be an add. And the reason why, do you see how I'm just keeping it normal? Because how add works is exactly that. What is 1 plus 0? 1. Okay. That's pure black is 0. All of these numbers are above 0, even the gray. So if you add it, there's going to be no change. So you don't need to change the blending mode. There's no point. It's literally pointless. So we'll call this raw lighting. And I'm going to have to do the thing for each one. So I'll try to fast forward through each of it, but we're already halfway done. So now we're going to have this diffuse filter. And then go in here. We'll go into our sphere mat, alpha mat. And we're going to actually, this is where a lot of the work, we're going to come back to this actually, because this is where one of the biggest, coolest things are. And I'm not going super complex. I want to keep this simple so that you could grasp it. Now, again, it doesn't look correct because it's not. In this case, if you do add, it's going to highlight it, but we're not. We're just going to change it to multiply. Okay. So now you're seeing that we're getting this lighting here. We're getting the shadow from under. And it's starting to look correct. Now we only have one more layer. And we have these other guys up here where there's the Z depth. And then those matte ones, which we'll get into. But the Z depth is going to be that. So we could apply that last. That'll be the very last effect we add. So we're going to go down to reflection. And remember what I said. Actually, let me illustrate this right here. I'm going to go to add. And this actually does work fine because it's black and white. So in this case, we'll be fine just without having to cut it out because it's in an additive mode. It's black. The only thing that's being added is that. And if this doesn't make sense, I'm just going to use a different color like red. We'll go under here. And then we'll just use the Luma matte. So you can't really see it unless I turn off the alpha, but the only thing shining through are the lighter parts. So that's all that is. It's nothing crazy. I'm just going to exit out of all of these guys for now. Okay. And we've rebuilt it. We rebuilt our render. So this is going to be the end of part 1 for this tutorial. The next tutorial, we're going to go into really diving into the channels and switching them around more like I did for cutting this out. And then we'll finish it up by just having, some Z depth or maybe some atmosphere to it.